Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Good Will Hunting. This movie tells the story of a janitor at MIT who is a genius for math and chemistry, but he doesn't realize his potential. When he is almost sent to jail, a professor at MIT decides to bail him out under the condition that he works with him for math every week and that he visits a therapist. Little does he know that the therapist will change his life in so many ways. Can he find his true self, become a better person, and finally realize his dreams? Let's find out in Good Will Hunting.
Good Will Hunting.
Good Will Hunting begins by showing Will Hunting being picked up by his friend, Chucky, to go to work. Will is a young man in his 20s, working as a janitor at MIT. When Will is working, he accidentally listens to a lecture session in math class by a lecturer named Gerald. That day, Gerald challenged his students. If they managed to solve a mathematical formula that he wrote on the blackboard, that person would get a prestigious award, and his work would be published in the MIT Journal. After the lecture session, Will went into the lecture hall and read the math problems Gerald had left on the blackboard. Will carefully read the problems, interested in solving them. On the sidelines of his time at work, he tried to write the answer to the mathematical formula on the blackboard hanging in the campus hallway. After that, a student saw the answer Will had written and quickly reported it to Gerald, who was attending a class reunion at his campus. Gerald immediately came to the blackboard in the hallway, and he was surprised to read the answer. According to Gerald, solving the mathematical formula takes a long time, but someone got it right in no time. During class, Gerald asked all his students who solved the formula, but none of the students confessed. One afternoon, Will is with Chucky and the rest of his friends, watching a baseball game. His eyes fell on a young man holding a woman by the railing of the stands. That man was the one who bullied Will when he was little, but Will ignored him and left immediately after the game. In the car, Will accidentally sees the man flirting with a woman on the side of the road. Will asks Chucky to pull over, then he gets down and beats the guy. Will's friends also help him. But then, their dispute escalated into a brawl because the men's friends joined the fight. As a result, several police officers came to stop the fight. Unfortunately, Will accidentally beats a police officer, which gets him arrested and faces prosecution in court. Back on the MIT campus, Gerald was still curious about who had succeeded in solving the mathematical formula, so he gathered all his students from various generations. But still, he couldn't find the person he was looking for. At the police station, Will has finished his interrogation and is picked up by Chucky. They intend to hang out at a new bar near the Harvard campus because they get an invitation from their friend who works at the bar. Then, Chucky teases the students, claiming to be a Harvard history student, while Chucky gets acquainted and is engrossed in chatting with a Harvard student named Skylar. Not long after, Skylar's friend, Clark, joins them. Clark interrogates Chucky with questions from history to revolution. Feeling uncomfortable with Clark, Skylar then tells him to leave, but he still insists on testing Chucky. After a while, Will was bored with their conversation. He then approached them to turn things around. He answered all of Clark's questions, which took him by surprise. But Clark still didn't want to lose and kept giving his argument. Will refuted Clark by saying that Clark's question is unoriginal, which is an excerpt from an expert's question. Embarrassed, Clark left. Skylar marvels at Will, so she invites him to exchange phone numbers. After that, Will and Chucky came out of the bar, but he saw Clark still bragging in front of a woman. Infuriated by Clark's attitude earlier, Will showed Clark the paper with Skylar's phone number on it through the window. The next day, while Will was working, he saw another formula that Gerald had written on the blackboard in the hallway. He immediately wrote down his answer, and at this moment, Gerald and his assistant suddenly appeared. Gerald called for Will, but he walked away from the blackboard. Gerald tried to chase after him, but found Will had disappeared at the end of the hall. Since there was nothing else he could do, he went over to the blackboard, and he was even more curious about Will, because all the math formulas were answered correctly by Will. One day, Gerald, accompanied by his assistant, went to the head of the janitor, who informed him that the man he was looking for was Will Hunting. Will works as a janitor because the juvenile criminal assimilation program requires him to. However, Will is currently on leave because he is undergoing a trial in court. In the courtroom, Will comes alone without a lawyer. He defended himself in court by mentioning all the articles he was charged with, much to the judge's admiration. However, Will is still being punished because it was a violation to hit the police. After learning about the case that Will is facing, Gerald immediately follows into the courtroom and proposes an assimilation and rehabilitation program so that Will is not detained in prison. While meeting Will in custody, Gerald offers a deal on 2 conditions. The first condition is for Will to help him study and research mathematics with him. The second requirement is that Will must attend a therapy session with a psychiatrist. The 2 conditions put forward by Gerald must be carried out properly. If one or both conditions fail to be fulfilled by Will, he will be detained and sent to prison according to the court's decision. Although Will doesn't like the second condition, he chooses to accept it rather than go to prison. After that, Will works with Gerald to solve math problems. This first condition can be easily done by Will even though the math problems are quite difficult. However, for the second condition, he deliberately causes trouble to make the psychiatrist sick of him. Before a therapy session, Will always reads the profile of the psychiatrist he will meet. Then during a therapy session, he will strike back at the psychiatrist, so he often changes psychiatrists. But that did not make Gerald give up. He met an old friend named Dr. Sean to ask for his help. Will finally met with Sean. The first therapy sessions were relaxed as they only discussed Will's childhood. In the middle of a therapy session, Will sees a painting painted by Sean and tries to analyze its meaning. Will said that the painting means to be tossed about because someone left him. And indeed, Sean told him that his wife had died 2 years ago. Hearing that answer, Will commented about Sean's wife, which made him furious and nearly strangled Will. The results of the first therapy session were reported to Gerald, and to his surprise, Sean asked Gerald to tell Will to come to his therapy session next week. Meanwhile, Will has been dating Skylar, and they seem to be compatible. They spent time eating at a restaurant and chatting intimately. A week passed, and Will went back to see Professor Sean for a second therapy session. This time, the therapy sessions took place outdoors, on the edge of a lake, where they chatted casually. However, Will started doing all kinds of things again to make Sean sick of him. But his efforts failed. Sean admits that Will's analysis of his painting was spot on and that what Will said the other day had disgusted him. However, Sean realizes that Will is just an unsociable teenager who has never been out of Boston. Will had never experienced falling in love with someone so deeply, the way Sean loved his wife. Will is just a cowardly young man who is afraid to make commitments. All of these striking statements from Sean left Will speechless. After that, Sean left Will alone, asking him to reflect on his words. Sometime later, Will returns to see Sean for his next therapy session. Here, Will throws another tantrum by not speaking a word until the therapy session is over. After a therapy session, he visits Skylar to ask her out on a date. But Skylar is busy working on a task with a tight deadline, so she refuses Will's invitation. Will decides to do all of Skylar's work so they can go on a date. That day, they spent time together watching dog races. In between dates, Skylar asks about the background of Will and his family. She wanted to meet them. Will lies by saying that he comes from a large family with 12 siblings, when the truth is that he is just an orphan and has no family. In the next therapy session, it's Sean's turn to tell Will about his past and how he fought for his true love. He said that he fell in love with his wife at first sight, and she died of cancer. A few days later, Skylar still insists on meeting Will's family. In the end, Will asked his 3 best friends to pretend to be his siblings. They spend time together at a restaurant, and Skylar seems to be adapting to Will's 3 fake siblings. But Skylar was still not satisfied. She still wanted to see the rest of Will's family. Gerald arranges a job interview for Will to land a position at McNeil Industries, but Will sends Chucky to come to the interview, while he himself goes on a date with Skylar. While on a date, Skylar invites Will to come with her to move to California because she will continue her education at Stanford Medical School. Unexpectedly, Will refuses Skylar's invitation because he doesn't want to leave his hometown. Even though the real reason is that he is afraid that over time, Skylar will find out his true background. Besides, Will is still afraid to commit. Finally, a quarrel between them ensues after Will says that he no longer likes Skylar. Since then, their relationship has been strained. His breakup with Skylar eventually affected his life. He had a dispute with Gerald, and he also refused a job at a large institution. Will's actions are questioned by Sean when they meet at a therapy session. Sean asked what Will really wanted, but Will replies with a joke that angers Sean and throws him out of the room even though the therapy session isn't over. After that, Will calls Skylar and tells her that he intends to find a new job. But because she was still hurt, she didn't care what Will said. She only said goodbye to him because she was leaving for California soon. But Will ignored her farewell. Disappointed and upset, Skylar flew to California. A few days later, Will is working with Chucky on the location of a project. While they are resting, Chucky advises Will, saying that he will accept his fate if he has to work as a construction worker for decades because that is his specialty. However, if he were to become Will, who has given such great intelligence, he would be willing to do anything to achieve success. If Will chose to stay on the project site, he thought it would be an insult. Chucky would be happier if one day he stopped by Will's house but Will wasn't there because he is busy with work. He will be happy for Will's success. Hearing Chucky's ramblings, Will immediately froze. One day, Sean and Gerald are arguing about Will's recent behavior. However, their conversation is overheard by Will, who comes for a therapy session. Will came into the room, and Gerald left immediately. In a therapy session, Sean reads a report about Will's childhood, where he was often abused by his adoptive father. Sean admits that he was often abused as a child. Then the therapy session continued with Sean influencing Will's psychological side by repeatedly telling him that it wasn't Will's fault. He kept saying that until Will got angry and cried in his arms. After the therapy session, Will goes home while reflecting on what he will do for his future. At the end of the film, Will accepts an offer to work at McNeil Industries. He returned to see Sean to tell him the steps chosen for his future. Then, Will gets a Chevrolet Nova from 3 of his best friends for his 21st birthday. They assemble the car themselves as a token of friendship and celebrate Will's transformation. Using his new car, Will decides to pick up Skylar after sending Sean a letter. The message of this film is that the habit of reading can improve one's career to get a bright future. With the knowledge gained from reading, you will be able to determine the steps needed as a strategy in determining the future you choose.